Hello friends, I'm going to give you the timeline of the mythical factory farm, and alongside that I'm going to put my family and we're going to walk through a timeline. We're going to assume that a good operator that works hard can produce 10% interest on his money, on his investment, and also can get 10% for his labor and management and time. And they're going to live frugally. So off that 20% a year, they can expect to keep 18% back into the farm, which means they will double every 4 years, rule of 72. So in 1946, a Dutch immigrant comes from Holland to Artesia, California with $1,000 in his pocket. He starts milking cows. By 1950, that should be $2,000. My pocket came in 1947. He made two mistakes. Number one, he came to Everson, Washington, not Artesia. Number two, he didn't start dairying until 1950. Okay, so he waited. So he missed that first doubling. In 1954, we see grade A tanks starting to show up. About half the dairies in the country quit because they don't want to go to a tank. You have to survive this, and that would be $4,000 of net worth at that time. At that time, my pocket was going through a mental crisis, bordering on suicide. Set the family back, another doubling. In 1958, this mythical family would have had $8,000 of net worth, and at this time, we're going from buckets to pipelines. And my pocket was on the same wavelength. They bought a bigger farm, got a pipeline. 1962, this family would have had $16,000 of net worth. And in 1962, my dad got sick of his alcoholic brothers and went to his own dairy. A dairy at that time in Everson, Washington was $30,000 for an 80-acre dairy. But the family had split up at that point. In 1966, this mythical family would have had $32,000 of net worth. And now we're on where we're making the march from Bellflower and Artesia to Chino, and the first milking parlors are starting to come. In 1970, this family would have had a net worth of $64,000. And we're just starting to see, sets of doubles for hay hauling, this and that. And my dad was a young farmer. In 1968, my grandmother died of breast cancer. My pocket was pretty much heartbroken, sold the farm. That was the end of that whole generation of farming. My dad was on his own, pocket out of business. 1974, our family, this mythical family, would have had $128,000 of net worth. We're just starting to see the second generation of dairies, second generation of dairymen, and we're just starting to see some of these families get their second dairies. In 1978, they would have had a net worth of $250,000. This is the beginning of rapid exit and mixer wagons, things like that. 1982, this mythical family would have had $500,000. Farm crisis. So at this time, if you had $500,000 in a farm crisis, you started seeing some of these Southern California guys either moving dairies or buying heifer ranches in places like Idaho, New Mexico, and Texas. Some of that Chino money was starting to have tentacles go out. In 1986 came the buyout. Our mythical family would have had $1 million. And that holds true. The biggest dairy in Whatcom County on the buyout was just at $1 million that they got their buyout check for. I still have coffee with that guy. Interestingly enough, my pocket passed away in 1985. And even with all that happened, the late start, the mental illness, the cancer, the alcoholic sons, the family strife, still died with had an estate of around $500,000. It evaporated amongst the 6 siblings. My dad used it to pay off debt on the farm. He kept milking 40 cows. Anyway, in 1986, this mythical family would have had a net worth of $1 million. I got my first DWI. In 1990, they'd have 2 million. At this point, we start seeing the 1,000 cow dairies. You know, the double 16s, 1,000 cows is kind of the magic number. A couple of the bigger dairies did the head-to-head parlors, and they were milking up to 3,000 cows. In 1994, this family would have had 4 million, and now we're seeing the mass exodus out of Southern California. Dairies getting built in New Mexico, Texas, Arizona, Idaho, Eastern Washington. I bought a little cattle hauling business in 1994 and abruptly totaled my first pickup and trailer. 1998, this family would have had $8 million. And now the guys, this is about the time that BST come out. 1,500 cow dairy was kind of the magic number. It was one parlor, it was one mixer wagon, and there was increments of those. In 2002, this family would have been at 16 million. Now you're starting to see the third generation of farmers come along, and you're starting to see rotaries. By then I had wrecked my second truck and I was selling cars. In 2006, this family would have had 32 million. And we start to see the real estate boom, the last of the really big monies coming out of Chino. We start seeing digesters, this and that, different kind of off-farm things creating income. I got in the personally, my dad was getting Alzheimer's. They had quit dairying, and I personally was in the feedlot business, putting cattle in the feedlot. 2010, this family would have had 64 million. And we're just starting to see the beginning of family-owned creameries. Now, the big-time families had already started their creameries over the years. Rockview, places like that. 2014, you would have seen these families with 128 million. You're starting to see the multi-state operations. You know, calves in Arizona and Texas, dairies in Indiana, Iowa, Ohio, places like that. 2014, my dad was still alive, but he has Alzheimer's. I had 5 calves and calf hutches. 2018, you would have seen this family with 250 million, $250 million. And now we're starting to see, you know, the 30,000 head dairies. And in fact, just last year, a 30,000 cow dairy in Idaho sold for $200 million. I was back up to about 40, 50 head of stockers. In 2022, we're going to see this family now with $500 million of net worth. And, you know, if you want to Google things like Fairlife, Rockview, some of these generational family things, that's what you'll see. And yeah, we had 50, 60 head of stockers. What was the difference? A, got an early start. B, no matter what happened, these families kept focused. Whether there was accidents, cancer, divorces, fights, recessions, wars, booms, busts, these families, right? And there's about 20 of them left. And I just talk about the dairy industry because I don't know about the lore of the big families in Minnesota and Iowa. They're out there. Now, if we go back 20 years earlier, you see a J.R. Simplot. That is now a, I don't know, $7-8 billion company. Why? Well, started earlier, tremendously focused, tremendously successful. If we go back to the 1900s, the Stewart family had Carnation Farms. And when they went off the stock exchange in 1986, they sold everything to Nestle. Supposedly the Stewart family of Duval, Washington was worth $600 million. If that's been wisely invested, that's multiple billions of dollars. So when you look at a factory farm and you complain about a factory farm, just know At some point, somebody started with nothing and busted their ass for a whole generation, right? At some point, somebody came from Holland. Somebody came back from the war in Minnesota. Somebody came back from the war and, went somewhere and started farming, and they just busted their ass. Small operation, but the family stayed focused for that whole time. And so every one of the generations in my family's been somewhat financially successful, but there hasn't been that focused family wedge that keeps going. I'll use an example. It's not in the dairy industry, but Lafarge Concrete, they just bought our local concrete plant. They've been in business since 1856. They have 135,000 employees. They're nationwide. You can keep your family in business long enough and stay focused enough. And again, if you can get through the accidents, the cancers, divorces, fights, recessions, and keep going and focused, you could be there. And if I said to you, hey, you know what? Someday your grandkid could sell out to Nestle's for $600 million, you would say, yeah. You would think that'd be awesome. You would not look at me and say, no, I don't want my kid to be successful. If you did, that would be a lie. So there you go. That's a mythical basis of a family farm. Have a great day. God bless you.